Hi everyone, and welcome. Very happy to have you. In today's webinar, we'll be covering the role of Infosec teams during COVID-19. We'll discuss the challenges and the opportunities, and talk about what we're seeing in the field today. My name is Asaf Rashef, Marketing Manager at Vulcan Cyber, and with me here today is Andy Ellis, CSO at Akamai Technologies, and Yaniv Bar-Dayan, co-founder and CEO at Vulcan Cyber.
Hey, Asaf. Hey, Andy. Hey, everyone.
Hello, good morning for those of you on the west coast of the US, good midday, and good evening for those of you in Europe and Israel.
So here's just a quick sneak peek of what's coming up for us today. So first we'll discuss what was it like transitioning to COVID distancing, as Andy coined and likes to refer to it. We'll talk about the potential changes in the KPI that we track and the goals that we set for our teams. And looking back, what have we learned so far? Has anything caught us by surprise? We'll talk about what effect did this new arrangement have on vulnerability management programs specifically. And we'll talk about kind of the top tips for remote vulnerability management. And finally, we'll open it up for questions from our audience. So starting with the transition to working from home, Andy, can you share from your experience? What was it like at Akamai?
So for us, I think we probably had one of the smoother transitions in that we had already been on a zero trust path of eliminating VPNs and getting people to be able to connect using, internet access proxies. So when we said, hey, first people are allowed to work from home, and then a week later, oh, by the way, you need to work from home. For most people, I think the technology transition wasn't the problem. I think what really was the biggest challenge we ran into is we have a lot of staff that didn't have a home office setup. Maybe they had a number of housemates and they really only had one room. It was their bedroom. And so they had a couple of boxes that their laptop sat on. Or maybe all of a sudden they're a full-time caregiver and educator for some small children. And so that's a challenge for some of our staff. But I think one of the biggest challenges we often see is the reliance that people had on sort of face-to-face meetings and just ad hoc conversations as a form of information transfer, right? Say, oh, I need to talk to this person about the thing, and you're going to see them later in the day, and now you're not going to see them. And so you have to be more deliberative about how you share information.
Indeed, it's really interesting. When I look at it, somehow COVID brought us into a situation where it doesn't matter how big or small your organization is, you're going to face probably the same challenges. Yes. It's gonna be hard to communicate, and you need to get used to the ways of communication when you are a 40 people company like Vulcan, or you're thousands of people company like Akamai Technologies, which is astonishing to me. I have to say that from my perspective, the technological challenge was also not that great. We, unlike Akamai, are a new company. We were born in the cloud, so we were forced with a good architecture for remote work, and our business is delivering software as a service, which is also operated remotely in a way and helps us. I think that what we had to do, and I'm going to talk about it also probably as we go through, we had to adjust in two ways from the very beginning. We had to find a way to mimic the office environment, create fake occasional meetings, and create fake areas where people could interact outside of a subject, because everything has a subject now. You have a Zoom meeting with a subject, and you want some meetings with no subjects whatsoever. And on the other side, I think that you understand as a business that you are more than a business. Especially when you're, it doesn't matter if you're a small company or a department, people are connected to one another on a personal level. And suddenly people miss that, and they miss the interaction. And they miss going out of their house, and they miss their kids going to school, and miss a lot of other stuff that I guess creates other challenges. But I was amazed. I see it with, working with various organizations and talking about it very openly, the challenges that we have and the challenges that they have, and we say the same words and we talk about the same issues.
Yeah, I think the fascinating thing about that is even the seeing people not in this like work unstructured, but just how many meetings when you're in person, did like the first two people in the meeting, right? They just spend a while talking about their kids. And a lot less of that happens over video conferencing. And part of it is sort of this discomfort that if there's like 10 of us in a room, which feels terrifying right now, I'll be very honest. But when you had 10 people in a room, like I could turn to Yaniv and I could say, hey, Yaniv, what's going on? We whisper, and there's 5-side conversations. And you can't get that. And so people are really craving those little connections, whether they're an introvert or an extrovert. I think everybody needs some of it. I think in some cases, some of us as introverts are getting more social face time than we might otherwise be comfortable with. I probably spend like 6 to 8 hours a day in various video conferencing things with people staring at me. And I'm like, I can't hide in the corner of a meeting room anymore. I used to be able to do that. And that's very unsettling.
Yeah. Do you feel like it impacts innovation in your organization?
So I think
in terms of new ideas?
Yeah, some of it is, there's impacts, I think, in both directions, right? There are people who look at crises and obstacles as opportunities to innovate. That when a new obstacle shows up, sometimes you say, what could I do to solve this that I might not have been able to do before or willing to do before? And sometimes that innovation is about removing roadblocks. Saying, wow, we had this roadblock that only affected the 30% of our staff who didn't work in a major office. It should have gone away 3 years ago, but now it affects 100% of the staff. Innovate, get rid of that roadblock. I think people are doing more innovation about how do you communicate.
I can say
In other cases, I think it's painful. There are people who aren't working at their best right now because they have so many other things going on.
Yeah, I think that when we use the word, I was very concerned about it in the very beginning. Like I was concerned from how people are going to communicate with me, because I tend to, when I walk in the office, we eventually all of us are in the same, plus minus the same open space. I have the ability to communicate with everyone, and now I don't. Now I have the ability to communicate maybe with the people who are working with me directly, and maybe one step ahead of them, but that's it. But on the other hand, I was really interested to see how the company adjusts to innovating in product and innovating in bringing new features. And what you see is two things, at least two trends in our small ecosystem. I see, first of all, that this new situation allows you to populate a lot of small problems that you used to ignore when you're in the office. And you used to maybe put them in different subjects or titles or others. And I think that us as a company, we're going to adopt a lot of the different things we have built across these. I think we're finishing our 8th week working from home globally as a company, to the day after COVID, and to the day when we're going to work already together in the office. On the other hand, you see that there is an opportunity. So, Churchill said, never waste a good crisis. And there's something about that. Like this crisis provides an opportunity to solve big issues that your company, that your customers and your partners are having now because of COVID, that might have been minor in the midst of regular life, but now they are popping up to be major. And they were major before, you just didn't see them.
Right. Well, and what I find actually is really fascinating is how much capacity is being freed up by the lack of travel. Right, is how many projects or initiatives which required massive coordination across an organization, that just trying to get a status meeting, you'd sometimes be 3 months before you could get the same 12 people in a room. Now the reality is there's an innovation we should have done around moving to more written status, and but at some point you want the FaceTime and you have to cross coordinate. Well, with nobody on the road, even though we still have people taking vacations, that's a really important thing to to recharge their emotional batteries and for their mental health. There is way more ability to just rapid cycle if you need to on coordination meetings and having conversations to build consensus. And I'm absolutely seeing that with some initiatives I'm running, that where it used to be there were like 3 senior vice presidents I'd have to get together, and I was lucky if I could get a meeting every 3 or 4 weeks. And now I can have 2 a week, and we're like brainstorming and working together and making our trade-offs. And so we'll much more rapidly get to a consensus decision. Now, whether you think we should get to consensus or not, that's an open conversation.
Yeah.
But certainly removing the amount of friction that people disappearing was creating has been fascinating. And I wonder how that's going to affect companies that got used to this sort of speed of execution.
Yeah, I can say that you've said something very interesting that we'll probably refer to later. And I know Asaf I see his face. He has so many other questions.
I know he wants to click to another slide.
He wants to click to another slide. But when I looked at this new situation, and myself, I had to obviously adapt to it as well.
Mm-hmm.
You understand that the business-oriented stuff, the professional stuff, when you are a technology company, a software company, but by the way, today, probably any given industry that does not rely on something super physical, production, flights, and so on, the business will catch up. It's an organism that knows how to adopt and adapt into new realities. The one thing that I understood, I think, and we as an organization, we understood very quickly, is exactly the issue around mental health. And how can you make sure as borders between house and work are becoming a blur, are coming just, they're not there. And there are people that are used to work from home. They're working from home across their entire career, but they have never worked from home when everyone else are also working.
Right. And that's a big thing, is you're not working from home. You are working from a crisis center.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And there, and I would very much love to at least carve us 5 minutes for me and Eddie to chat about that in the end. I am still extremely curious, and I'm still very attentive. And I think us as an organization, we're trying to focus as much as possible on how we can maintain the mental health of our employees and make sure that, apart from aligning this, breathing organism we call the business to the new reality, we don't forget that there is another organism called employees that has to have their time as well.
Absolutely. And there's really interesting boundaries you have to be careful about crossing. You want people to do a bunch of things for their mental health, but you have to be careful about, can you tell them to do those things? And if you do them with them, are they as valuable as if they can just do them away from you? But how do you make sure they're doing those? So let's make sure we get 5 minutes at the end to cover that. But let's talk about some changes we've seen. So Asaf, we'll let you click the slide.
I appreciate that. Thanks, guys. So actually, this kind of talks about what you've been mentioning before about accommodating our processes and our company to this new reality. So, I think it's an interesting question. Do the KPIs that we measure, or do the goals that we've set personally for ourselves and for our teams, have they changed? Yaniv, how have you seen this develop at Vulcan?
So it's an interesting thing, because when all started, I thought everything is going to change. But as we progressed, what you see is actually, and by the way, I think it applies to everything. I'm going to talk about the company as a company, but I think the analysis that we've done in the past 2 weeks, mainly starting to debrief back on what was there, also applies to information security, to marketing, to whatever. I think I had to mention, when you look at your KPIs, probably 80% of them had remained the same. Maybe the number, so the key performance indicator remained the same. The thing you aspire to achieve remained the same. The number might have been adjusted. So, let's take 2 very common KPIs that every company has: revenues and the number of customers. For example, Vulcan decided to keep the KPI around number of customers just the same, but we understand that the KPI of revenue will probably drop down, because in times of crisis, you might give higher discounts or do whatever, or work with our customers to make sure they survive the crisis and then move forward. So the goal in 80% of at least our business remained the same. The numbers might have been skewed up or down, depends. The other 20% is around opportunities. So this crisis obviously created a lot of trouble, personally, globally, economically, and so on. Some of them we don't even know. We can't even expect what's going to happen next. But I think this crisis also provided a lot of different opportunities, business opportunities, and partnership opportunities, and technological opportunities, and HR opportunities. And we had, as a business, we had to also adapt to that. We had to also look at the things that this new situation serves to us and say, these are the new goals we have to achieve that are directly related to the new reality that the world is now facing. And we had to change our plans eventually in a way. But at the bigger picture, we manage the company probably in the same pace. We aspire still to almost the same business matrix. And we try to align ourselves to some kind of truth that applies to the new reality.
Yeah,
Andy, what do you think?
I really like how you put that, you know, and I think for you it's 80-20, for other people it's going to be 20-80, but there is sort of a class of things you do that are mildly impacted. And I say mild, like the people who are directly impacted, I'd see major, but you're still trying to sell stuff. And there are still people who are buying stuff. Great. For you, that puts that in that 80% bucket of no major changes. You just adapt the way you would adapt to anything. You know, if you're in the travel industry, that's a problematic 80%. People aren't buying your stuff. Like, you're drastically shifting. And then there's the second bucket, which, you know, for the travel industry is their core, but for you is a different one, and for us the same, where all of a sudden this is so different. Like, how do you run a meeting? How do you communicate with your organization? You know, I do this, it's about weekly, but not quite, you know, every week, where I just do like these 5 to 10 minute videos, you know, fireside chat, and just, you know, put them on our internal site for my team. You know, some of them have nothing Akamai confidential in them, and I'll put them on YouTube, where it's just this, hey, you know, normally I'm walking through the hall, somebody asks me a question, I have a 5-minute conversation with whoever's in earshot. I can't do that. So what am I going to do that's so different? So you see, I've, you know, have a nice podcasting microphone. I've worked very hard on my audio and video setup, whereas before, you know, I was just using my laptop microphone, and my audio quality was horrible because I never did it. But now I've had to completely retool how I communicate with my staff. And honestly, it's for the better. Because before, I had a bunch of my staff that never saw me. They never got to hear my voice other than like once a quarter at our all hands meeting. And those are the disruptive things. We have people working from home. How do we just do tech support? When somebody has a problem and they can't walk over to the help desk, our help desk is thinking hard about how to change in that world. You know, we're relooking at our real estate. We just moved into a brand new headquarters. It's a gorgeous building that nobody wants to go into. Like, even if we open back up, how many people want to go back into, you know, a building with so many humans in the same space right now? So we're rethinking, like, what does the work experience look like? You know, we already told all of our employees that if you're not in one of the core critical positions, it's already allowed back in the office. Like our knock technicians work in the office today. If you're not in that, you are authorized to work from home for the rest of the year, even if the local location opens up, because we wanted to give our employees certainty in this place that for them is a major crisis, because they don't know if they have a school for their child in the fall. Like, there's a big question about in-person schooling. And that's a place where I think we as companies never really thought about, is we sort of turned a blind eye to people's home conditions. We didn't want to know because we don't want to discriminate by knowing. And I think now we have to actually really be inclusive, and put that in our 20% that's majorly disruptive for how we operate. But that's where the opportunities all lie. Like, you could wait until you get run over by it, or you can just jump ahead and go get it.
Definitely. I think that, you know, we see, and you start seeing that. I mean, you see companies like Entity Data or others that have decided to go permanently work from home, and that's it. And I think this is, so I think it's probably very radical. Like, people can't even imagine that, because all of us, we are social creatures. Like, we want to engage, we want to see people face to face. But on the other hand, obviously, people somehow got used to this situation. I see it from ourselves. So our workforce in its majority are still fairly young, and not all of them have kids. And for the people who who are now in their home, which is probably the most convenient place. In the beginning, it was horrible. It was horrible also for me. It was horrible to adjust to your work life, like taking a stop between waking up in the morning and sitting on the computer and drinking coffee between them, or doing something instead of just running to the keyboard or or things that are similar. But slowly you get used to it, and it's convenient, and you don't have to comb your hair every morning and take hair and go to the hairdresser every 3 or 4 weeks. Some of us.
Yeah. Although I've had to learn how to do it, so
yeah. I was very messy up until two days ago when the hairdressing saloons were open in Israel. But now we are actually, so I don't know if everyone listening knows that, but Israel is starting to slowly get back to normal under very, very severe restrictions, but still. And part of the things that we are thinking about is the transition back is going to be just as hard as the first transition to Covidistancing.
Right.
It's going to be just the same, and we'll have to again adapt to a new reality just the same, with different premises 100%. Even a year or two from now, we'll probably act differently. So it's interesting.
Yeah, no. What I'm really looking forward to is seeing how the in-person experience changes based on what people learned. One of the things I noticed, because I was one of the first people in our company to just say, look, I'm just going to work from home because I can. And I noticed that first week when I would dial into video conferences in a conference room, that people in the conference room sort of sat in a circle. Like, it's a long table with the camera at one end, but they sort of physically were in a circle around the table. So people had their back to me. I wasn't part of the conversation. And now, where everybody is so used to, no, you look at everybody. Are we going to, when we go back in person, are people going to actively think about remote participants as an equal player in the conversation instead of just the afterthought? How are we going to think about commutes? I enjoy the fact that people, when they start their workday, even if it's at the same time that they would have after a commute, they're not stressed by driving or dealing with public transportation. They might be a little more mellow. Now, other folks are very stressed by small children that won't go away. It's a different challenge to manage. But yeah, no, I think you're really right that coming back is going to be a disruptive experience also. And I don't think we talked about the reduced goals from productivity. I think there is a real thing that we had some employees who gained productivity. Like you said, there are people who are bored with nothing to do in their home. They don't have small children. And I suspect many of them are working longer hours than they ought to. That's part of the mental health thing we'll come back to. But we have others that they're not able to work as many hours. And those ones really want to get back in the office in some cases. Like, let me trade days with my spouse. They'll have the kids on odd days. I'll have them on even days. And I need to go to the office because my kids don't believe that if I'm not, away from the building. But so we've had to reduce some goals. And some of them were just reduced because you lose 2 weeks for the transition. When we come back into the office, you should expect to lose 2 weeks of productivity. Like, people are going to be so happy to see each other. They're going to come into the office. You're going to have 3-hour lunches because people have so much to catch up on. And you should make space as an employer for that. Like, you should recognize people need that. That's part of their long-term productivity. And you should sort of shortchange yourself from a long-term perspective.
Should embrace it as an employer.
Yep. Now, allow me to step in real quick just to keep us on pace for all that we have planned. I want to talk a little bit about the surprises and what we've seen over the past couple of months. Now, obviously, a lot has changed, but I'm curious to know, and Andy, we can start with you, if anything in particular has caught you by surprise.
Ooh, that's a hard one. I do think the working from a crisis center versus working from home caught me by surprise. When this started, I worked with my team and we actually put out a blog post on working remotely, saying, look, here's some things to think about for, how do you do that graceful transition in the morning so you don't just run right to your computer? How do you schedule exercise? And we never took into really account this concept that you were trapped in your home with a bunch of other people who might not be in that same model. Now, for me, part of why it caught by surprise is I have 2 teenagers, a 13-year-old and a 14-year-old. And I am probably in the first generation of parents in human history to say, thank goodness I have a teenager. Because my kids get up in the morning, like we still have to help them get up. That's teenagers, you have to drag them out of bed. But at 9 a.m., they're at school. Like their school is completely online. It pivoted all of their activities. My daughter's doing karate over Zoom. Like we cleared out a room, so it's just got a TV. She plugs her laptop into it, and she can be seen, and she has enough space to do her kata, and she's happy. And so we see them at meal times. So for us, it's like they're at school. So I don't have a crisis in my house. The person who has crisis is my wife. She's used to having alone time. Like the house goes quiet, and now it's never quiet. There's always somebody wandering around. So that for her was really the big surprise. She's an extrovert. She thought this would be fantastic. I get to see people all day long. Well, it turns out we're all still bustling around, but now we're just in her way. So I think that's, for me, what really caught me by surprise was how little sort of space people got in their lives. We thought this would be an easy transition. You just need to learn how to work from home. No, you need how to learn how to live in a crisis, which is a very different problem.
Yeah, I would chip in by saying, to me, there were two surprises, main surprises. One, I was really concerned about how efficient the company could be in this situation. And it's actually even more efficient than ever. But on the other hand, it's a curse. And I know that because I have observed myself. And in the beginning, the first 2 weeks, I was so exhausted by the end of the day. And I was so drained. And I started thinking about why. And I understood that I operate, and I don't have, I'm a very, obviously all of us are very busy people. But I had blanks. I had a half an hour here where I didn't have a meeting, or an hour where my inbox was on zero already and I was waiting for a meeting, and I felt guilty getting up of the computer and go and rest outside or drink coffee.
Yep.
Now, when people are around you and you see, you have someone to talk with, you feel less guilty because you see it as part of the social interaction within your work. And we took measurements. So when I understood that, I said, if I feel guilty, and I'm the air quotes boss, then everyone in my company feels guilty as well. So we actually had to enforce times off in the middle of the day, an hour and a half for lunch, another 15 minutes at 4:30 p.m. to drink coffee with people over Zoom, just giving people legitimacy to stop working anytime between 9 a.m. to 6, 7, 8, depends on who you are for the organization, how you're operating. And after 2 weeks, suddenly when understanding that and when putting these things in place, still efficiency went up.
Yep.
But people are becoming more, people are healthier. Discourse is becoming more pleasant. People actually enjoy watching TV in the middle of the day, talking with their partner in the middle of the day. And these things are things that it surprised me how much I can learn about the experience of other people in my company from my own personal experience.
Yeah. It's an interesting, I love the idea of setting up those times. And I'm trying to figure out how I would implement it across an 8,000 person company. I think it's easier in sort of small teams. And we have a couple of those, like this is our afternoon social. We have a lunch hour once a week set on our Krakow time because we have a team in Krakow. And we have a bunch of folks from Boston who, 7 a.m. here, they connect in to have breakfast / lunch. And then another one on a different day for Cambridge. But I think that a thing that really did surprise me is the people who stepped up the most to support the social interactions for that first month were actually all of the introverts. That it's the people who are nominally introverted tended to be the ones who already understood how to use technology to support their social needs. And so we're able to say, oh, look, let's just do a Zoom call. I know how to, I'm normally good with a Zoom call, but there was almost this fatigue that people were getting too much. The introverts became these linchpins in so many communities, not just at work, also in other places, that they're getting too much, while the extroverts no, give me more, support me more.
Yeah.
But we're seeing more and more of those extroverts are learning how to use the technology and how to drive it, not just be a participant, but to say, oh no, I can plan an event for people and we can do a thing. But I think there's a lot more opportunity for that.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
I think we should all admit, the biggest surprise, none of us thought this was going to be this long.
Ah, 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
We were all planning for 2 to 3 weeks, not 2 to 3 months. And who knows how many more months many of us are still going to be in this world.
Yeah, I agree.
Yep. Yep. Okay. So moving the conversation forward, I'd like to focus on vulnerability management specifically for a little bit. Now, these processes and programs obviously changed because teams are now working from home. So Yaniv, I'm curious to hear what's changed from what you've seen with customers.
So it's very interesting, and obviously I would love to hear Andy as well. But I think that vulnerability management is an interesting part in the cybersecurity mission and of the cybersecurity problem, because it's probably the one that is most dependent on organizational collaboration in a way. There are so many stakeholders around this process. And also, and these stakeholders are operating in different realms with different goals, KPIs, people, cultures, ways of thinking, everything. And I think that today, as somehow happened also in Eddie, it's easier for them on the one hand to get a hold of each other from the very beginning because of the lack of travel and because of the fact that people are more reluctant to do Zoom meetings than just look for the face-to-face all the time and find this time. And I think that from a human perspective, some communication gaps grew larger. So, and actually the interesting thing is I think the communication gaps grew larger within the organic pod. So within security, within IT, within DevOps, within R&D. But outside, while taking the already set up cadences and turning them into virtual, and when you were around so many different virtual meetings, every virtual meeting has to be the most efficient virtual meeting. It actually made communication and collaboration across teams a bit better. It's still not ideal. It's a huge problem in terms of, it's all about organizational communications. Before technology, before everything. If you communicate well, you're halfway there. The second thing is I think that also here, the crisis had presented some kind of opportunities that can lead to shift in priorities. Some systems and some platforms that were widely used by customers when everyone were outside and everyone used their regular lives are becoming less important now, while others that were used less are becoming more important. And the areas that are usually highly used in regular days and stand orphaned these days are also the areas that we were most afraid to change their status quo, to patch them, to put compensating controls, to understand them. So now vulnerability management teams and IT teams and DevOps team has the opportunity to look at the areas that were not really neglected, but their risk had been accepted because of their importance to the business. And now they have the opportunity to bridge the gap, to solve and close the technical debt. On the other hand, also some stuff had became paramount to the organization. How do you help people connect remotely in a secure way? And how do you enforce different cybersecurity controls? Vulnerability management, patch management is one of them, or even the patching the tool that you're using to connect in order to assure high level of information security. And I think this is, vulnerability management is one part of a bigger program or bigger concept called cyber hygiene. And the modern world of vulnerabilities is not just the CVE that you get from your infrastructure scanner, but it's your misconfigurations in your cloud, it's your AppSec issues that are coming up from the different static code analyzers and dynamic code analyzers and so on. And the way we attribute risk to them today is changing, just because the way we manage our digital estate is changing. And this leads to obviously change of priorities, change of executions, and so on. KPIs, I think somehow remains the same. Meeting the SLAs in the right time, working around how do we quantify risk in each organization with their own risk appetite and their own way to quantify risk. It's just that either the numbers are changing or the focus of priorities is changing as well. How do you see it, Andy?
So I think you really hit it around the cyber hygiene and the shifting in priorities and risk aversion. And I think there's this normal trend that I think we see a lot of companies doing where, normally it's hard to prioritize hygiene anyway. Which is actually sort of interesting because when you think about how humans themselves act, like you just have your hygiene rituals, you do your hygiene rituals.
Hmm.
But I guess if you've never brushed your teeth, it's hard to remember that you're supposed to brush your teeth.
Servers doesn't smell. That's the
I know
problem.
that's the problem. That's true. Like when you get a signal that says you need to work on hygiene,
Yeah.
and during a crisis, it is always the hygiene that seems to sort of fall out, right? That people become risk averse to change what they're doing, and they're already needing to stretch other places. For us, in a sense, we're really blessed is that the disruptive thing we were doing was the vulnerability management. We were already looking and driving at a very senior level. How do we improve vulnerability management? So for us, the cross coordination got more efficient. And so that's helping drive and offset the
Hmm.
natural tendency that says, well, we don't have as much space to get things done. Let's not disrupt around this right now. Now, we're still seeing that and we're still fighting that. And I suspect everybody is seeing and fighting that. And that's where the real push to say, how do you make coordination costs smaller? Like that
Yeah.
it shouldn't take, 10 people working together to answer a question about whether or not a machine is patched. And today, for many enterprises, that actually is the reality. If I want to say how many of my machines need patching or are behind on patching, that's a hard question. And we still do find that one hard, but we're getting better at it because we have the management coordination infrastructure sort of already set up.
I also see, so obviously, because this program is so complex, it requires a lot. So it's not only about, sometimes it takes, you know, 200 hours a month just routing tickets to the right place, which is also very much manual.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And I think that for many organizations, because this program is so sensitive, change management, changing the way you operate your production, non-production environments obviously can impact efficiency. There was a lot of fear around delegating from humans to machines. And I think today what you see is that there isn't any choice, because there are challenges. All of the challenges that were there before in terms of how many working hands you need to manage this problem, it became also more aggressive than they used to be in the past, when we used to communicate with one another and we had more time to act around these small stuff. And I think companies that we used to talk about automation before, and they were very reluctant to take this space. Doesn't matter if it's, fully automating a patching cycle through super advanced technologies like through your pipeline, through whatever, without any human interaction, like the holy grail of automation that not a lot of companies are willing to go down this road. But also they were very afraid about opening tickets in ServiceNow that are already assigned to the right person. And I think today people understand that there is no other way, because these things have surfaced out. So it's funny, but we get a lot of more questions from current customers and people that are interested in our technology and what we do, not only around how, how the management of vulnerability management is being done through our product, but actually how can they do more to reduce the manual effort around that. Yeah. And that's something that we felt will come in 5 years from now. And it's actually coming in now.
And I wonder how much of that is the loss of the ability to gripe about a task as you did it, right? In so many places where we're not automating, right? We have a human whose job is read out of one system, copy and paste data, and click a button into another system. That's all you're trying to automate, is like a human doing what is really a dumb task. Like all the information's here, the human isn't adding much value. And as they would do it, they would gripe to their cube mate and be like, I can't believe I have to do this. And then they would do it and they'd move on. And now their manager is saying, hey, what's on your plate that I can take off your plate? What work isn't providing value? And they didn't have the ability to blow off the steam. So if they had to click that 30 times in the last 3 hours, they didn't get to complain to anybody. And now they're going to say, why do I have to do this? Can you just automate this? Because I'd rather do the other parts of my work. Those are more fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I wonder about that. I don't know for sure that that's a problem piece of it, but it feels like it might be.
I also think that, we are, some things we wear as a badge of honor that we do, even the small stuff, like it's these things that we don't want to. So I feel it about myself sometimes. Okay, I feel that that if I'll go down a certain route and ask for a certain thing to happen, I'll perceive myself and I'll be perceived by my environment as lazy, or
Hmm.
not focused enough, or focused on the wrong stuff. And who cares if you have to copy and paste 50 tickets every day? It takes you an hour. Okay, you have 8 more in your day. Do it. And now you understand that the value of people actually focusing, and this is something that it's hard to see, because as a point, when you are a person that does that as part of your role every day, and you don't see the bigger picture, it's harder to understand how much your time is valuable.
Hmm.
If you'll come into your manager and you'll tell your manager, you can spare me 1 hour a day, 7 hours a week, 28 hours a month, in copying and pasting, and I can take these 30 hours is so much. You can do so much in 30
So
hours.
much more. Yeah.
Yeah. It suddenly makes a lot of sense. And any manager will say, makes tons of sense. Like, why should I pay you for this? And in
Yep.
the course of a year, you can buy millions of technologies around that. So, and earn the time for the people. So I think
Yep.
that's the interesting part. And that's a lot of the fear of being perceived by myself, not even by any other, because I'm the judge of myself. This is the curse and blessing
Hmm.
of this job. Is that I sometimes judge myself as lazy and say, it's too petty. Don't even focus, just do it and that's it. While it's a wrong way of thinking, because I can invest my time in things that will help us grow
Scale
and
or
bring more
grow
value and
or
scale.
make that
Exactly.
change that you see, right? Yeah, I
So,
see people often, you justify it. You say, oh, it's not just that I'm copying and pasting, I'm adding value by reading it. And you
yeah.
might be, but maybe that value isn't being translated into you driving work. Go drive some work that will improve the process. Let the automation do the stuff that isn't valuable.
Yeah, I learned it in my first flight to Boston. I talked with a very smart guy I know. They told me every minute you're focusing on doing something that someone else is doing, you're not doing your job. So it's a double problem.
Yep.
You're interfering with someone else, and you're not focusing where you should focus.
I love that. It's a
Um,
great way to put it.
yeah, you told me that, and then you don't remember maybe. You told me that.
Okay, so moving forward, yeah, I would love to give our audience some advice when they go back home to their companies, to their teams. Now, what would be some of the top tips that you would have for them for remote vulnerability remediation specifically?
So I think the biggest thing that I would look at for people as they're working on how to do this is, how do you get the right bang for your buck? I've seen places where you go to patch a system and it takes you forever to schedule a maintenance window, and by the time you do the maintenance, there's another patch waiting for you, right? That we sometimes get so fixated on, this is the piece of software to roll out to solve this problem, that we don't look and say, how do we maximize the value of a patch window, right? If we need a maintenance window on a system, how do I get it as close to perfect as I can to minimize how quickly I'm going to have to come back, or my stress over I didn't get it all done? And so single biggest tip is figure out, how do you get that right piece of visibility into what you need to do, that you aren't cycling, because the owner of that system is going to get grumpy if the moment you're finished you say, oh, by the way, I now have another thing I have to do, can we immediately schedule one? Right? That's not going to make you allies, because they don't see patches as providing value. You're defending value, but you're not providing value. And so they're going to look at your needs very differently in that case.
Yeah. I will say on my end that I think that what we see our customers doing, and probably the most effective thing, is re-examine your priorities and focus on your opportunities. As I said before, this crisis had led to us working in a very different way, and a lot of the technologies, but not only, a lot of our processes, mainly around vulnerability and patch management, are focused on being very tailor-made to the way we've worked before. From even how do you patch laptops when everyone are constantly in their homes?
Yeah.
How do you, should you even patch? Can you use competent controls to that? Can you patch core systems and do it once, something that you haven't done or you haven't had the chance to do for a year or for several months because of the function of these systems? And I think that first and foremost, the problem and the blessing with vulnerability management is that it's a very continuous process, just like showering. And just like if you'll notice that you always shower in the same order, you always do vulnerability management in the same order as well. And this is something that you have to change. You cannot keep on doing that. Just like you're washing your hands now every time you're getting out in and out from home, because the human hygiene goals and requirements had changed in the pandemic. So your IT requirements around hygiene had changed. And you need to make sure, and this is something that is unique per organization, because every organization chooses to utilize their workforce in a different way during and to optimize and to allow and to open things for the workforce. So I would say, don't be afraid to do a core shift and a core change of the way you operate. And most importantly, and this is, I think, it applies to the world before, but it's 10 times more important now. The core essence and the core thing around vulnerability management is treating the system owners, the operational teams, the business users as your allies, yes, and making sure you operate with them as allies. Yep. The vulnerability management problem will never be solved, period, because it's something continuous, but it cannot be solved in this continuous manner if we will keep treating the other side as the other side, instead of strengthening these alliances between us as security practitioners to our allies around operations, and understanding that we are there to enable them. And we are there to provide them with the tools to first take decisions. Is the risk high enough to mitigate versus the risk of something will crash, or the risk, to the business and so on? But also, how can we enable them to do that effectively, swiftly, and precisely in these times where efficiency is probably everything?
Yeah, that's a really key point. I'd take it one step further. And while today it's about treating them like your allies, it's recognizing that to the business, they're the heroes and you're the sidekick. Mm-hmm. And how do you enable them? And how do you not pick battles that you can't win? Right? There are systems right now that are not going to get patched. They're too mission critical. It's too high risk. Everybody knows it. And if you just are standing on the tabletop going, you have to patch it right now, all you're doing is wasting your credibility. Recognize that it's not going to get patched and say, I understand we can't patch this one right now. What are we going to do to mitigate that risk long term? How do we get into a world that we can patch it, because we can't stay there forever, and be seen as somebody who is, as Yaniv just said, enabling the business rather than fighting the business, because long term, that's how you get everything done.
No, I think it's a very hard mission regardless to the time. I think that for us, to be able to understand that we are part of a business, and there's always, the higher level of decision is eventually about the business. And yes, sometimes a vulnerability or risk that might cost, the patching of it might cost tens of millions of dollars versus the possible damage. It might be, summed up in $1 million or $2 million. It sucks that it's like that. I mean, the situation sucks, but this is the reality. Eventually, this is the essence of security: helping the business run quickly, enabling their partners, your heroes, to actually operate well, and agreeing with the business decisions and aligning with the business decisions. We are part of the business, and our goal is to maintain the business in the best way possible. Yeah.
So a quick look at the time. We have just under 9 minutes. So I want to keep a couple minutes at the end for questions, but guys, where do we go from here?
So I think Yaniv had a great point earlier about emotional and mental health. And here's I have a mental model that I use for people's sort of well-being and energy. If you've ever played Magic the Gathering, this might sound familiar. I think of people as having mana pools. right? And this applies to vulnerability management and to people. So just bear with me for like 30 seconds. You have a monopool for work, and you have one for personal stress and for your children and everything else. And every time you have to spend emotional energy, you're burning out of that pool, right? And the pools refresh themselves off of the other pools, right? When you go to work and you put down your children, right, you're not worrying about them for a day. Guess what? That pool gets a lot of energy back into it as long as the rest of the pools aren't also empty, right? When you're in total crisis, you're out of energy, you never recharge. And you can think about, any maintenance, cyber hygiene is just being a pool. Like, how much energy do you have to do this is based on all the other energy you still have. When those all run out, this one's going to get drained too. So we need to figure out ways to give people space where we don't consume the pools. Let them recharge. And that's the biggest challenge we have with people who are operating from a crisis. Like, they can't switch and put down, if they had a fight with their spouse this morning, they're in the same room or next room, that they don't get the distance to recover from it. If they have a fight with you and then they have to be on video with you 3 meetings in a row, like, they might need some space to recover from that fight. And even if that fight is just about whether we're going to schedule this today or tomorrow. And so learn ways to separate and give people space and encouragement. I like the, Yaniv's idea where he says, hey, let's take, this time window is just for coffee. No meetings in it because I want you to go recharge. We've tried some similar things where we tell people, in the next 2 weeks, everybody has to take a day off. I've got one team that looks at, half their team takes one Friday off, half takes the other Friday off. And, I think we've got to find ways to help people recharge and experiment. Recognize that we as managers don't have the solutions. We just have the power to give people space. And in vulnerability management, that's also true. I don't have the solutions for vulnerability management, but I can give a system owner space to experiment with something new, just like I can give my staff space to experiment with ways to recharge their energy.
Yeah. I will say, at least from my perspective, first of all, I really agree with Andy. The first top concern I have on my mind is constantly the mental health of the employees, and mental health, by the way, of everyone around me, our customers, everyone, because, also us as vendors, we have the responsibility to not also flood our partners, whoever they're going to be, and keep them also mentally healthy. If you have 100 approaches every day in your inbox from people that are, trying to get your attention, you are not really contributing to the overall mental health of your partners. But I do think, so when I think about it, and I tend to obviously think about it a lot. What is the problem with this crisis? Apart from the technicalities, the fact that we are far apart, and we are in social distancing, and we miss, going to a restaurant and so on. The biggest problem is uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen. And because we don't know what's going to happen, we are afraid to take decisions, definitive decisions, like moving everyone to work from home, like changing priorities, like changing KPIs, like doing, like setting up time for a day off, like a lot of things to say, oh, it might be in a week from now, we might go away. In 2 weeks from now, it might change. So I think that from here, and we're already 2 months in this crisis. I suggest to people to embrace uncertainty by looking at every day as it is certain. What I mean is, if we're now working from home, then build as a company, as an individual, and everything in between, build the process that will provide you certainty in the way you operate day to day.
Yes.
If things are opening up half, and you have the ability to then work half from the office, half from home, create the certainty around that and do it swiftly and decisively. Or don't, but be decisive. Provide people with the, if the company, work, your family, doesn't matter. Our job is you're always, in some areas you're responsible, in some areas you are, you're reporting to someone that is responsible. When you are head of a family, your goal is to give your kids, you and your partner's goal is to give your kids the highest level of certainty. So they will become saying, when you are a CEO, your goal is to, or when you are a C-level executive or a manager of a small team, your goal as a manager is to provide the highest level of certainty to your people. because that's what will allow them to maintain this level of sanity.
All right, so I think we might have time just for one quick question we got from the crowd. Andy, I think this one is perfect for you. So for many companies, the goal is just to keep their head above the water. So the question being, is the board even open to talk about security this time? How do you get a good conversation going?
So it's really timely. My next meeting is actually my prep meeting for my board report. Going in front of the board next week. Every quarter, I sit in front of the audit committee, and I think the board has that appetite. Security is part of keeping the business's head above the water. Now, I think if I walked in and didn't talk about Covidistancing and everybody being remote, I think it's going to fall on deaf ears. So part of the question is, how is this affecting us? That's a real-time conversation. What risks are new? We changed the way we operate. Did that bring in new risk? Did that get rid of some old risk? Those are the timely pieces of the conversation that help anchor you with relevance to what's going on right now. But if you just walk in and throw up a dashboard with a bunch of numbers and, that's got a bunch of Christmas tree colors on it, that's really not going to compel the board. They're going to look at it, they'll nod, their eyes will probably be glazed over because they don't remember the last time you presented this. Is this better or worse? But how do you make it relevant and self-contained? You have to remember that while they read everything you send them, you can't assume that they remember what you sent 18 months ago. It's real for you, but that's so far in the past that you have to refresh it and contain it and really deliver a crisp message.
Okay. I think this is all the time that we have. I want to be considerate of everyone's time, so I'd just like to thank Andy and Yaniv for taking the time for this webinar, for this conversation today. It was very interesting, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Andy. I always enjoy these conversations with you.
Thank you. We should do it more often.
Yeah, definitely. Stay safe, everyone. Thank you for your attention. Goodbye.